Welcome to Thank the Maker, King's College London's premier creativity talk show. We are coming to you pre-recorded from, wait for it, my home. Yep, this is our first remotely made episode from outside the studio at King's College London, so we hope you bear with any of the audio hiccups along the way across this episode. In case anyone doesn't know, on this show, Thank the Maker, we bring on creatives from in and around Kings, and this time internationally from Malaysia, to talk about their projects, what makes them creative, and kind of all the art and theory in between. I'm your host, Clay Ballard, and today we're interviewing Umar Sharif. He is a Malaysian-born and located community and arts manager with an arts-focused Singaporean startup. But prior to that, Umar has quite an interesting creative history as an architect, an artist, an actor, and even a content creator on YouTube. So we hope you join us over the next hour or so as we explore the culture of creativity at King's College London and internationally in Malaysia. We'll be right back with Umar in just a moment. So welcome back to Thank the Maker. I'm your host, Clay, again. I'm here with Umar. Umar, how are you doing?
I'm doing really great here, Clay. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. It's weird doing the show, so this is the first time I've recorded this show from my home on my computer. And so the technical configuration has taken like the past 24 minutes. So we've been trying to figure that out. But yeah, thank you so much for bearing with me, number one. Thank you so much for number two, staying up late to talk with me, because I know it's like 9:25 there, whereas it's 2:25 here.
Yeah, but 9:25, that's not really late for me.
And it's Ramadan for you, right? How are things going with the quarantine and trying to celebrate all that with your family?
It's definitely really weird this year because Ramadan is an incredibly social spiritual month. You know, there's the bazaars, there's the congregational prayers, and all of that's off the books for this year. So it's super weird to have Ramadan during quarantine, that's for sure. Yeah, but I finished my I just broke fast with my family just now. So yeah, I feel full. I have a lot of pep in my step right now because I just had my meal. Yeah, so let's go.
That's awesome. Good timing then. What time does the fast end in Malaysia?
Right now, like 7:20.
Okay, so you've had a couple hours to digest then. Cool. So for those that don't know, including myself, because for a bit of history, we met in an acting class in Kuala Lumpur at KLPAC, KL Performing Arts Center. And since then, I've come to know you as like quite a creative individual. You had kind of your hands in a lot of different buckets, so to speak, creatively. But what do you do now? What's your title and who do you work for?
Okay, so I work for this Singaporean startup called Naisse. And Naisse is spelled N-A-I-I-S-E. It's just a colloquial way of saying the word nice, as in saying these things are nice. So I am the community and buying manager for the Malaysian branch for this company. And what Naisse is, it's a niche e-commerce platform. They're a platform for local makers, the local makers industry. So basically artists, arts and crafts, workshops, all these like small mom and pop things. Yeah, and they have a few brick and mortar shops in Singapore and just one brick and mortar shop in Malaysia. And I'm basically in charge of the community and the buying for that particular shop, which is located in the Zongshan building, which is this arts hub in Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah, explain it, because it's such a interesting concept to me. It's a building that houses all of these arts institutions and companies. What is the idea behind the Zongshan building?
Okay, the explanation is actually quite interesting. So basically, it was a migrant hostel. It is an old 50s urban block of like 3 shop lots together. And the current owner for the building actually inherited it from his father. and he is someone who is quite artistically inclined. His wife is actually
Hmm.
a curator. So they started by opening an art gallery in there, and then after that, they kind of slowly attracted all these other creative practitioners. There's a fashion designer, there's several graphic designers, architects, interiors, and a few like artisanal shops as well. Yeah, so together, oh, and one lawyer's office, but he's an art collector. So all of it together creates this kind of like zany, kooky community of very like indie and very artsy people. Sometimes it's very funny because I am a bit exposed to American media, and sometimes I kind of feel like just watching the building feels like I'm watching a sketch of Portlandia in front of my eyes.
That's so cool though. That what a unique concept. I feel like I've seen this elsewhere, but the idea of like collectives, but it is executed in such a cool way at the Zhongshan building, with it being like in the historical building, and just all the events that were put on as well within that space. Um, okay, so I know the answer to this question, but I'm curious to hear it again. How did you find your way into working where you're working today? Because your background is not exactly aligned with that.
Oh, definitely. I guess I can kind of go through my patchwork of self history here.
Please do.
Okay, so I originally studied architecture, yeah, and I did work as an architectural assistant for one whole year before deciding, bleep this bleep, yeah. And after that, I was a content creator. Yeah, while I was being an architectural assistant, I got together with my friend who also studied architecture with me, and we started a YouTube channel where I do drawing tutorials. Now, I'm very much a dinosaur with technology, so I don't know how to handle things like cameras, editing, all that thing. He knows how to do that. I know how to draw. So together we created the little episodes. It's kind of really like it's very rough lah, because it doesn't involve a lot of sophisticated equipment. But somehow people like that, and it did manage to gain a modest following of like we did get like more than 100,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And yeah, YouTube also sent us one of those silver buttons. It never stuck because we've never been able to turn it into something to make a living out of. Yeah, it was never ever sustainable. So both of us had to get like different jobs, and it kind of fell by the wayside. Yeah, sometimes I when we first got the silver button, I always joke with my partner, can we please smelt it to buy groceries, please? Because we're like so cool. Aside from that, while we were doing that YouTube thing, me and him, we opened a company, our own company, called the Mottman Training, and we provided like little architectural services for BIM modeling. That's like using software to create like buildings. I hated that. My friend, he's really good in that, so he loved doing that. And in between doing that and going nowhere, I also hopped between did lots of different jobs in between. I was a tuition teacher. I worked retail. And then, yeah, I took an acting class. And that's where I met Clay. And after that, I somehow landed as a community and buying manager for Naisse. Yeah, because I happened to go to that building a lot. Yeah, then I just saw like a little hiring sign there, and I'm like, hey, are you hiring? Yeah, and the rest is history for 2 years.
That's incredible. That is like such an interesting like creative career trajectory. So God, I have so many questions that like stem from that. In terms of architecture, I imagine, and please give me your own answer, but I imagine you started there because given what you've done throughout the rest of your career, it seemed like it was a creative pursuit. What kind of disillusioned you with architecture?
I suppose, okay, I'm only speaking from my own personal experience, so this might,
Of course.
yeah, so this might not apply to other people who are practicing architecture. I didn't get to be creative. It was a very like repetitive, drudgery, and also it had really bad work ethics. Yeah, I did
Hmm.
24 hours in the office, and okay, that part is actually pretty common, bad work ethics in architecture. And you see so many other creative people, they're like, they do photography, they do art, whatever, whatever, and turns out they started out as architects too. So yeah, it's a pretty common story, but one that carries with it a little bit of like this feeling of shame, a little bit. I don't know if that's also universal, or maybe just because of uh, I don't want to like throw stereotypes. It could be an Asian thing, to like kind of start something and then kind of fail at it and then have to resign yourself to something that's not as not as hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you perceive it like that? That it's not as difficult? Like, is it, because that's something I kind of struggle with too, is like I have my creative pursuits that I love doing, and then I've had like my kind of academic career pursuits that, like, yeah, are a bit more difficult for me, but I can't tell whether it's more difficult for me because I don't enjoy it or if it's just like a difference in difficulty. Like, does that kind of inner debate ring true for you?
Oh my God, that is so true for me as well, actually. It's something that I struggle with and something that I still can't answer right now. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah, like objectively judge and tell myself, like, is what I'm doing actually harder, but I enjoy it, therefore it doesn't feel as hard? Yeah.
And of course, there's the social stigma attached because like architecture is seen as like such a prestigious job and position, whereas these more niche positions, like, you have to take the time to explain it, right? And like that in and of itself kind of undercuts the prestigiousness. But anyway, I think that's awesome. I think it's super cool that you've been able to follow like your interests and what you want to do. Um, what, I guess, looking ahead, do you like what you're doing and see yourself doing it for a long time?
Hmm. Uh, I'd say that I like it enough. And I like to stick around for this job just because there's a lot of practical skills that I enjoyed learning. So much learning, actually, even in just 2 years. Somehow I feel like these 2 years were even better than like 4 years at university. And I want to stick around until I can absorb all that practical skill and then do something else with that. And what I see myself going forward is kind of like, yeah, something in like arts management. Yeah, because I can see that I have a knack for managing people, keeping relations, and all that.
Yeah, arts management is such an interesting topic. So, in my degree, which is global media, I'm within a broader department, which is it's CMCI is the shorthand. I think it's cultural, media, and creative industries, CMCI. Yeah. And one of the degrees within it is arts and cultural management. And we kind of share classes, so I pick up a little bit here and a little bit there. But one of the big questions with the degree is what does managing art even look like? Because creativity and art is supposed to be this free form process, where is it individualized, is it team, is it social? So there's all these questions of like, yeah, what does that even mean to be an art manager? So to point it back to you, yeah, what does managing art mean to you? Because I'm super curious to hear or your own answer to that theorizing.
Cool. That's a really good question. Actually, like I feel like I can answer it based on observing other art managers in the Zongshan building because it also houses several like consultancies, like art consultancies and also galleries. So I am usually hanging out with the curators there. So I get an idea of how it actually happens. Number one, there is actually a structure to it. So regardless whether the artist, if they're working in a team or they are individuals, they're a collective, whatever, you give them enough structure within whatever crazy method that they work in, as long as you ensure some kind of outcome comes out of it. And then the outcome is something that's kind of ready for an exhibition or a show or event. Basically, you manage them so that they create this outcome, and then there is a public that can receive it and enjoy it and experience it. Yeah, so that's basically what I see and surmise from what I observe.
Very interesting. So if I'm understanding correctly, you as an art manager, you need to provide a structure for the artist. You need to set some sort of goal or outcome, and then identify the audience for that outcome.
Yeah, very well put.
I'm just summarizing you. That's it's super cool to hear it put that way, because a lot of the theorizing that I've, like, I guess, grappled with talks a lot about like constraints or the lack thereof. Yeah, working in groups or not working in groups. I feel like there's a public perception of art being like not very structured. Like if you're an artist, what do you do every day, right? Do you just sit around and get inspiration and then do things? How do you layer on a structure onto these kind of notions of creating art, of like you need to take time and find inspiration, and inspiration only strikes when you least expect it. So how do you levy structure onto something that's that kind of abstract?
Yeah, that's kind of like the really romantic way of looking at it, and I think that's the perception that a lot of the public might have. But and I think maybe the art world would like to keep that kind of perception because it makes them seem mysterious and sexy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I do notice these structures actually, even with art among artists themselves, especially the ones that do make it and they are very good. I notice structures in how they approach their work, how they approach their inspirations. Usually, what I notice is that they always have a point of view or they have some kind of objective that they want to express. They have a point of view, and art is just their medium of expression. Whether it's political, it's social, they're talking about rights or us or whatever. And that becomes, you could say, the initial railroad that the structure goes on. The train would look really crazy, but then everything is just geared towards achieving the objective of being able to express and communicate that particular idea or value efficiently with the public. And on an aside, also kind of make it sellable for their market, because that is also that's what I noticed to be quite a big factor as well. The market of buyers and collectors as well. I do notice that as well. And sometimes they kind of have maybe they're the ones who lay down the structures, because it's like, if you don't finish on time, I'm not going to buy this from you.
Right, yeah.
Like,
Do you feel like any of these structures, again, you're countering me with these romantic notions, but I always like to go back to them because they came about from somewhere. But do you feel like structure has the ability to kind of prevent art from coming about as much as it does to like enabling it? Or do you think that structure is only a good thing? Because like my head immediately goes to like these idea, like when you watch a TV show and they have product placement, right? That they are being forced to display something that they wouldn't otherwise display, but at the same time it's enabling them to even do that TV show in the first place. It's paying for whatever they need. Where Yeah, I don't know what the question is within this, but like what's the balance between structure and kind of free realm to do what you want?
yeah, I'm not too sure actually, but I actually am more on board with you. I do have a balanced view of that, in that I feel like some structure is good. Too much is definitely bad, and it could also cause to like some sort of burnout or within the artists themselves. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so actually we're gonna go ahead and take a break. And so you sent me a song, and I might mispronounce this, but it's by Alina Morang.
Alina Murang, and the song is Midang Midang.
Awesome. And what made you choose this song for our break?
Well, because I know that your audience would be, I assume it's the KCL student body, and I think it's quite interesting to show them something local, Malaysian, and also something that's done by a practitioner who practices at the Zhongshan building. So the artist is Alina Murang. She is from the Kelabit tribe in Sarawak, which is a state in Malaysia. And this is actually really exotic, even for me, even for other Malaysians. A lot of us are kind of blind to the richness of the culture that is already in Malaysia. So yeah, she is bringing like a contemporary spin to it and sings it absolutely beautifully. This is a little folk song about a girl who is she's supposed to get married. This is supposed to be like a matchmaking song, and she's just counting down a list of different guys and wondering like, which one can shade me from the rain best, which is super sweet. And yeah, don't let me go on. I think I should just let you guys enjoy the sound. It's super airy and super spiritual sounding.
Awesome.
Very exotic.
Well, let's give it a listen, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes. Welcome back to Thank the Maker. That was Elena Morang with Medang Medang. Yeah, super airy and like lovely to listen to. So we were just talking while the music was playing about how we're both coping with quarantine. As I mentioned earlier, this is like the first quarantine episode I've done. So in Malaysia, correct me if I'm wrong, they've got what's called the MCO. And so like you are not allowed to leave your house except for one person is allowed to leave your house for groceries and essential things. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and so how have you been doing through all that? Because I imagine it's have you left the house recently? Like when's the last time you left?
I I'm not sure how long, but I remembered like it's been a long time since I actually laundered a pair of pants, so it's been a very long while.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're lessening that come on Monday. And so we were just talking during the break about like yeah, it's hard to know how to feel about things kind of going back to normal because on one hand you want it to be truly safe. You don't want to ease off things to risk more lives, but like selfishly and totally validly, it's really tough being in quarantine for this long.
Definitely, definitely.
But yeah, so I guess kind of going off of that, one thing I know for a lot of creative people is one thing that we're grappling with as creative people, and really a lot of people, is this feeling of being productive versus being unproductive, and like whether we should use this newfound time to be productive or if it's okay to just relax because it's a global pandemic and like things are crazy. Yeah, how are you feeling with like productivity, especially pertaining to creativity? Um, do you feel like you've been able to get a lot of work done, or do you feel like high stressed? What's kind of your take on creativity during these times?
Hmm. Okay. Uh, I feel like for creative people, before you can work on your creativity at this time, you need to first maintain your sanity and your well-being. So I am on the train of like self-care and taking care of yourself first, and only then go on to be productive if you can. Because for different people, it would have different effects, and lots of different factors coming in. Because for some people, they are experiencing quarantine like by themselves. It's a little bit lonesome. Maybe it's a small apartment, not a lot of place to go. Some people are able to like do it in like a mansion, so it doesn't really affect them. So it really depends on like a case by case basis. But again, I maintain, like take care of yourself first, only then try and sort of be productive and do something.
Yeah, no, that's a good take and a good way to put it, and I think it really extends to like broader discussions over productivity within this, to get really heady, capitalistic society that we live in. Yeah,
Oh
make sure
yeah.
you're good before you start creating. Um, and this actually, it actually makes me pivot to another point that I brought up in the show before. Um, in discussions of like theoretical creativity, and like notions of like romanticizing it, there's this notion that like you have to be in pain or like have to be like emotionally uh, like having a hard time to create really good art. What is your take on that notion? Do you think you create better art when you are like in a good place or a bad place? Do you understand? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I think I can say that whatever state you're in, if you're a good artist, you'll make good art.
Yeah, that's a good cop out. I will give you that. But no, I think it's a good point. And okay, let's make this even broader and like
Okay.
crazier. What is good art? How do you define what is and what is not good art?
Oh wow. Okay, now I feel like that's not my place to really say.
Well, it totally is as an artist and a creator, I would say. Like yeah, what resonates with you?
Okay. If I can narrow it down to maybe what I feel is relevant or what matters to me, so long
Sure.
as you have a strong idea that is worth communicating and you are communicating it using your media effectively, whatever that media is, whether it's like photography or drawing, painting, theater art, as long as you're communicating that effectively and with high, with an artfulness in how you use that media, then I think you're creating good art.
Interesting. So, to play devil's advocate,
All right.
um, are you familiar with The Room with Tommy Wiseau?
Not right. Is it a show?
So yeah, and I'll explain it, I guess. So, The Room is this notoriously bad movie. It was made by this guy named Tommy Wiseau, and he was this aspiring actor, writer, director in LA that was from some Eastern European country. Um, but yeah, basically, he poured his heart and soul into this movie called The Room, and it was the worst thing ever made. Like horribly paced, crazy acting, overly long, overly complicated plot. But a lot of people have kind of looked at this guy as this staple of like what an artist should be. He put something out there. He put his heart and soul into it. It wasn't received well, but like he followed his dream and he did it. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is surely there's a distinction between like quality and value and communicating something from like your heart, right? Like there's like an effectiveness to it. So, as that counterpoint, like surely there are bad examples of people that have like poured their heart into something and communicated something that still didn't land quite well. So how do you kind of contend that with notions of like what is good art and what is bad art?
I think that's why I can go back to where I was saying, where you have an idea that you want to express. And then you have a media, whatever, sorry, what medium and media, whatever that you do, and then that's up to you to use your skills and talent to kind of communicate that effectively. So let's say, sure, he poured his heart out for this movie, but maybe if he had better skills or a better team or something, then maybe the movie would have been artfully better. Is it,
This is a whole nother jumping point, but it was something I was thinking about earlier when you were talking about your career trajectory. Um, you you had this like partner that you were with throughout the content creation days for you, and then throughout that company you guys started. What do you think about like partnership in the arts? Is partnership important, or is individuality important? Like, what do you feel like you're more creative when you're working in a partnership, or when you kind of have more control over your output?
Actually, I feel like collaboration and partnerships is very good for creativity. I do believe that a community
Mm-hmm.
breeds a lot of creativity, and that to some point, maybe isolation also kills creativity. I mean, because I suppose I'm coming from experiencing creativity and art from a community like the Zongshan building. So I see how beneficial it is, you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's so funny too, because I had a very similar conversation with one of my past guests, Roman Lewis, who's a musician, and one of the things he was saying something similar. But it's just so funny because I feel like there's these, again, to go to these romantic notions. There's these romantic notions of like going into a room and writing for days and then coming out with your magnum opus, but in actuality, it's these collaborations and working with other people that inspires more than just like your own inner monologue. Um, yeah, no, I totally agree.
I
Um,
think you can do that. You can isolate yourself, do that thing, but then after that, you go into your community of other writers, look over it, and then have other people, point out what they think and their critique. Because if you really isolate yourself like that, right, I really think there is a big risk of you and what you do becoming terribly like self-centered or myopic or tone deaf or irrelevant. So I always feel community for creativity is great.
that yeah, excellent, excellent points. Unless you're creating art just for yourself, yeah, you need some sort of collaboration helps, because if ultimately you're producing art for like an audience, right? And so it's not just for you. It's not just your point of view. It's not just this selfish creation. It is for other people, hopefully. Yeah, super interesting. Um, Another thing I wanted to ask you about is kind of the art scene in Malaysia, more generally, and Kuala Lumpur. One thing when I was living there that I thought was quite interesting about KL was that the art scene wasn't that developed, but because of that, you could really jump in anywhere you wanted, and that was super valuable. Whereas now that I'm in London, there's theaters on every block. I feel like the barrier to entry is much higher, and so it's like I can't. I've really got to find an accepting community that would like let me get my foot in the door. It's hard though because it feels more exclusive despite the amount of it everywhere. Do you agree or disagree with that? That I mean, this is just totally my impressions from a year living in both cities.
That's interesting, and I think there's value in both observations that you've had actually, because yeah, you are quite correct actually to identify that the art scene in Malaysia is quite in its infancy, definitely, and I guess because of that, the barrier to entry is also quite low, but then it does require a certain like exposure and cultural capital to like get in the first place. But yeah, but otherwise, actually, I can say that because it's so small, right? It is actually kind of struggling. Like it's struggling to get a foot or like get grounded within Malaysia. Yeah, just because largely Malaysian society is not one that is very culturally or artistically inclined to begin with.
Why do you think that is? Because like when I look at the history of Malaysia and what has originated there, like it's extremely diverse and extremely there's so much that has been produced and made that's culturally relevant and important and creatively interesting. So why do you think at like kind of this point that's less so? Is it a political thing? Is it just a society thing?
Both political and societal, I guess, because education here doesn't really education here is not they don't really advocate for you to be very critical. Yeah, so I have to like read my own country here, but yeah, they don't really push you to like explore things like this, even though culturally we are actually quite rich culturally. But then like even cases where like in some states where cultural suppression also happens, so certain dances become banned or something just because they think it's not appropriate to be part of our culture. So there's like censorship happening as well. So I guess aside from the art society or the art community being quite small to begin with, there's also a lot of censorship around it in how you can present yourself or what sort of work you want to present to the public, how you kind of need to wash it a little bit so that nobody kind of gets angry. Yeah, so it's a struggle being kind of small and not having enough autonomy, I guess.
Right.
Mm.
Interesting. On the flip side, though, what do you think Malaysia is doing well with encouraging its creative community and its cultural industries to develop? What is like happening in Malaysia that you think is like unique and awesome?
I can positively say that the makers industry is growing. So these are basically people who do like arts and crafts and then turn it into their like small businesses. And the thing is, these sort of artistic pursuits are kind of perceived to be quite harmless politically. So they're allowed to kind of to just thrive. And because of that, you do get a lot of great local, a lot of great local brands. Yeah, and they usually kind of do like a rehash of things that are just already within culture, like slang,
Mm-hmm.
and even using it for like memes and stuff, bringing it into the contemporary. Yeah, so that kind of stuff, it goes really well. But the ones where it forces you to kind of the ones that challenges you, especially on a political and societal level, those are a bit harder. Like if you have an exhibition for that, maybe it wouldn't be so publicized.
Right, right. Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Going back to my time, I loved finding the little like pop-up shops, or there's the monthly Rio in the city where they have so many creatives kind of come together. That it seems like there's so many up and coming like initiatives that really showcase these creatives that are appearing. And yeah, it's like super quality and cool and unique stuff. Yeah, particularly like with bringing like the kind of cultural touchstones and making them modern. Like yeah, I think back to the batik. You can find so many cool like batik shirts everywhere now that like have like kind of a contemporariness to them. So you're kind of blending that like old and new. So what I like to kind of ask every guest that I have on this show is generally their thoughts on like creativity and like what it is and where it comes from. So just to pose the question back at you, what does it mean to be creative to you? You have a really interesting background in history, and like I'd consider you an incredibly creative person in that you've worked in creation, you've worked in management, you've worked in like the industry side with architecture, so you have such a good perception of these things. What does it mean to be creative to you?
Okay, to me, being creative means being adaptive. Period. Yeah. Because speaking from a personal point of view, my life has been what seems to be a patchwork of more failures than successes, or maybe failures in an Asian sense. And because of that, I had to be creative
Mm-hmm.
over and over again. Yeah. So I had to adapt a lot because if I face my first stumbling block and after that I kind of just give up, then that means I would be kind of, in a way, like betraying being creative just by not trying to adapt. Yeah.
I want to kind of take this concept that you've presented and like make it macro and then make it like small as well in just terms of the creative process. Because I like this framing, this whole idea of like failure and overcoming it. If you are making a drawing, how does this adaptability play out when you're like just drawing a sketch?
Okay. I guess I can talk you through the process for it.
Yeah,
So,
I would love that. That'd be awesome.
yeah, definitely. So, I try not to pressure myself too much. Like, first of all, I always never expect a masterpiece to come out of it. Most likely, I want something to learn from that experience. So, let's say if I want to draw a portrait, it may not be the best portrait ever, but then maybe I've learned something about capturing a nose or something. So then at least I can adapt that for the next portrait where I'll draw like a really nice nose and then I'll learn how to draw better eyes or something. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Super interesting. And then to take that and make it macro,
Okay.
well, you've already kind of touched on this, but like in terms of bringing creativity into your career, I mean, I think I can speak to this as myself, but I want to hear your perception. How does that adaptability play out kind of on like a living and working as a creative?
Okay, I guess that would mean, uh, number one, to sort of feel like less of a failure, I'd have to dispel with a lot of old values. So that's me trying to adapt to what feels like a vacuum initially, like something that's valueless, has no standards or objectives. But then I kind of build up as I go along, and then I have to be like really kind to myself and kind of adapt all these other new values, adapt being in a different social situation, because every time I kind of jumped out of something, that means jumping out of that social structure as well, and then being getting through the cultural shock of like being with other people. So yeah, so it's just constantly adapting, but kind of constantly adapting and trying my best to not get disheartened every time I do it as well. Yeah, so that's also part of being adaptive as well.
Yeah, no, that's great insights. And I think your career is like a super interesting case study because you've hopped around. You've stayed in the creative fields, but you've hopped around to so many different like corners of the creative industry. Um, awesome. So the final question that I usually pose to my guests is to ask for a recommendation for my listeners. Do you have something creative, a piece of media, a book, anything else that you would like to recommend to people listening?
Yes, I do actually. So this might be a little bit of a cop out, but you guys, I'm speaking to the audience now. You guys remember hearing the song Midang Midang just now by Alina? There is actually a highly produced music video to go along with it, and you can actually watch it on YouTube. And I really recommend you guys to watch it, because just now you had like that audio, that oral experience. Now you can also experience the super lush visual experience to go with it, because it was also highly produced by a team of incredibly talented local like a local production team. They engage with local fashion designers as well, so there's a lot of these like really amazing looks that are all inspired by like indigenous patterns and fabrics, all of them Sarawakian. And then the locations as well, they flew all the way to Barrio, which is Alina's ancestral village, so it's also incredibly beautiful. So just watch it.
Amazing. Actually, I had it pulled up while we were listening to it, and it is awesome. Well, Umar, thank you so much for taking the time today and taking the time out of your quarantine and really Ramadan schedule. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you over the past 40 minutes now or so.
Oh, me too, Clay. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And for everyone that's been listening, thank you so much. This has been Thank the Maker.